Okay, welcome to another tutorial. I don't know about you, but I'm really ready for spring now. So I thought it would be really nice to think forward towards spring and draw this little bee today. So I have my line drawing already down on the paper. This is Fabriano Artistico hot press watercolour paper that I'm drawing on. This is the 300 GSM. I've already got my line drawing down and I just took the little PDF outline, put some pencil on the back, put some tape on the top, positioned it, stuck it down so that I could keep lifting it up and down to check it, and just traced over it with a nice sharp pencil. I used a H pencil to trace over it, and we're left with the line drawing. So the line drawing's down. The line drawing at the minute there is just a little bit too dark on the paper. I don't really want to see the pencil lines, and I will remove some of the pencil lines as we go around. But to start with, I'm just taking a little bit of my kneadable eraser and I'm just going to dab it on to the pencil lines so that I can take them back a little bit, make it so they're not quite so bright. So I've taken the pencil lines back a little bit with a little bit of kneadable eraser, and I'll also be using my Mono Zero eraser from Tombow to just take out the extra lines as we go through where I need to remove some of the lines. So I'm going to start by plotting in the two yellow areas first of the bumblebee. We've got to start somewhere, and I might as well just start with the yellow areas because they're jumping out at me. They're quite nicely defined, the yellow areas. I always like to look for some landmarks. Straight away I'm looking for landmarks with the drawing, and by landmarks I mean areas that are quite obvious on the portrait, the areas that might sort of jump out, that your eye's drawn to, and you can use those areas once you've plotted them in to then sort of work out around the portrait, work your way around the portrait from those landmarks, and it just makes it nice and easy. It just makes a nice natural way to sort of work around the portrait. I've got a little bit of paper down just to protect the paper from the oils that are in my hand. This is the cream pencil from the Polychromos, and what I want to do is come into this area with the cream pencil. I'm using little dash strokes, so little dashes, and just coming up the back of this bee. I want to make sure, I'm going to use the Tombow to just make sure those lines aren't there. Just make sure that I can't see them. So I just erase them with the Tombow and then just dab out any crumbs with the kneadable eraser. And I want to just come up the back of this yellow stripe. I'm just working on this yellow stripe down the middle down here. And I'm just going to come up the back of this yellow stripe with this yellow and put a nice layer of this yellow pencil all over the back of this stripe. In terms of the pencil stroke that I'm going to use, if I do it with a much darker pencil so that you can see, this is the burnt umber. If I just do, this is all I'm doing, just little tiny pencil strokes. I want my pencil to start at the bottom and to finish at the top, so I get a nice little flick on the end of the pencil, and that's all I'm doing with this cream. I'm going to come into this top bit of yellow as well, so I'm just taking out the edge of that pencil stripe there, and again I'm coming in with the cream pencil. So this is the cream from the Polychromos. I'm just using Polychromos pencils today, but if you didn't have Polychromos pencils, you could use any creamy yellow that you've got. And I'm just putting a bit of colour around this area. What I'm going to do from there is darken this yellow area down a little bit, and I'm going to use the Naples yellow. This is the Naples yellow. It's a little bit, it's still yellow, but it's a little bit more brown. It's a little bit more earthy, bit more of a, going towards a mustard colour. And again, I just want to put a suggestion of this colour into the back of this stripe, working from the back up towards the top of the bee, working from the back of the stripe up towards the top, and also putting a little bit of this colour along the back of this stripe along here. You can see it's just ever so slightly darker, and I just want to put a little bit of colour along the back. For the minute, as we work on this yellow stripe now, this little bit that's behind the wing here, I'm not going to put any more colour into that. I will put a bit more colour into the bit on top, and I'll put a bit more colour into this bit at the back. But the bit that's sort of sitting under the wing, I'm just going to leave that as it is for the minute now. But I'll bring the rest of this colour in. This is the burnt ochre from the Polychromos, and from the bottom of this stripe I'm going to again flick in that pencil from the base of the stripe up towards the back, so that I can keep all the lovely wispy bits coming up towards the top of the bee. I want to keep all those wispy bits coming up towards the top of the bee so that I can make it look like the fur on the bee. I want to give the suggestion of this fur on the bee. And so I'm coming up towards the top of the bee with a little bit of this burnt ochre. There's a little bit of colour in the middle here. I don't want to put this everywhere, not yet. Just want to put it on the one side, so on this left hand side, and put a little bit on the right hand side. And I want to press really quite lightly. I want to press really, really lightly with my pencil. So I'm just going to come back in and just add a little bit more. I want to build this up in layers. I don't want to go in with one heavy layer. I want to use several lighter layers so that I can blend this colour down on the paper. I don't want to just go in with one heavy colour of yellow, for instance. I want to mix my own version of the yellow and the orange directly down on the paper. I'm going to come into this yellow stripe again, and this time I'm coming in with the Sanguine from the Polychromos range again. And on the back of this bee, on the back of this stripe, really light pressure again, I'm going to use this Sanguine to bring some of this lovely burnt orange colour. Lovely burnt orange colour that's on the back of this stripe. Again, we've got a little bit of burnt orange colour around the middle. There's a bit more of the orange colour over this side, so I want to make it a little bit darker on this side of the stripe. Taking the pencil strokes from the back of the bee up towards the top of the bee's head. Nice little pencil strokes, and just putting a little bit into this area that's above the wing up here, the bit that's sitting to the side of that wing, just a little bit in there. Now that we've got our yellow stripes plotted in, we're still going to go back and blend them, but now that we've got the yellow stripes plotted in, I want to take this cream pencil again. I'm just going to dab out the back of the bee, the top of the bee up here. And what I'm going to do is just around the top up here, I want to come in with a little bit of this cream and blend it out towards the back of towards the top of the back of the bee. I'm just putting a little stripe over the top, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a bit of coal grey one. just under that cream bit that we've put in. And that fur, again, it's coming up towards the back of the bee. And then on the bottom part of this bee, I'm going to use the warm grey one. So we've had the bit of cream right on the top. We've had the bit of cold grey one towards the top. And then underneath, I'm going to have a bit of this warm grey one. And I'm going to come round the side. There is a wing there. I'm going to come around the side of that wing for the minute. I'm going to come down to the base of this bee. Some warm grey one into this down here. Bring it down. Just so that we don't lose it, I'm just going to go back to the cream. I'm just going to plot that little bit in. It's not as bright as that, but I'm just plotting that little bit of yellow in there, just so that I know that this is the stripe that comes all the way down there. So I've got a nice coverage of the warm grey one and the cold grey one, and then up into a little bit of cream at the top. Right on the top up here, where this stripe, where this dark bit meets the yellow bit, the yellow stripe, this is the burnt umber. And I want to start to feather in, still using these little dashes that are just little flicks of the pencil, but I want to feather in. First of all, feather into that little stripe. So I want to come out of the dark stripe. This is the dark stripe in here. I want to come out of the dark stripe, and I want to bring the pencil along the back of the bee. Now I don't want to completely cover over all of that cream stripe that we've put in. I want to sort of take the brown into it, but I certainly don't want to cover it completely. I'm just going to feather it around here and just shape this stripe around here. It's not a very big bee, so we do need to keep these pencil strokes quite small, because we don't want this fur. If we make the pencil strokes longer, we're effectively making the fur look longer, and we don't want to do that. I want to keep these pencil strokes really, really quite small. If I just bring my card back again, my pencil strokes are not any longer than that. That's as long as I want to make them. And then I want to just come around. Again, I'm just going to leave out this bit of the wing. This is all going to go under the wing, and I'm just going to leave that out for the minute. I'm going to deal with the wing afterwards. I just want to bring in some of this burnt umber. It's not going to completely cover the area. Not with this one application. We're going to have to go back in and do it again, or do it several times. But that's okay. I don't want to cover this all in one go, or I'm just going to flatten down the tooth of the paper, and I'm not going to be able to blend these lovely colours that I want to blend. I'm just coming along, so we're leaving all this for the minute. This is the wing. I'm going to come round the side of the wing and bring it down onto the underside of this bee, keeping those pencil strokes really light, and also letting the pencil just feather off and wisp off at the bottom, keeping it really wispy. I don't want that to be too dark and too heavy on the bottom. It's going to come down. To the side of that leg, and less is definitely more. It's always easier to go back, to add another layer, to do it again, than it is to go in really heavy from the outset, and then you just can't take things off. It's harder to take things off. When I get to the edge of the top of this yellow here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to feather my pencil strokes both ways. So I'm going to start to bring my pencil strokes not just up as we've been going, but also down, and that is going to help me feather the pencil into the top of this yellow, and it's going to help to make it look quite fluffy. I'll take this all around here. Now when we get to the corner of this stripe, and again I'm just going to feather that in, when we get to the corner of the stripe, the fur is going to start to come around this way. So really lightly, I just want to feather that in so that it comes around this way. I can't really see much fur direction on the bee, so I'm not going to put that much in. Just going to get a little bit in. I'm going to leave the burnt umber pencil just a little bit lighter in the middle here where we put that coal grey, and that's going to help me just create a little bit of highlight. And it's going up this way until we get to about this corner. It goes up this way over here, and then over the corner it just starts to come around a little bit. And I'm just leaving what's under that wing just for the minute. We're going to deal with that afterwards. Bring that round. I'm going to do exactly the same on the back of this stripe coming off the bee down here. So I'm going to put some base layer into this stripe at the back. Using the warm grey one again. Just want a nice little base layer. And I'm just coming down to the top of these lines. We've got these lines, this guide on the reference photograph on the line drawing. And I'm just coming down to the top of that. I'm also just leaving the leg for the minute. So I've put the base layer in, I've put the warm grey in, and then I'm going to go in with those backwards and forwards strokes to blend into the back of this yellow stripe really, really lightly. Really light pressure, and then again taking the little pencil flicks out towards the edge as we get to the top of the bee. And I'm only coming down to this bit of pencil line down here. And it's important that we do get a nice even coverage. That's really quite important. What I don't want are really harsh lines in one place and then not harsh lines next to it. I don't want harsh lines anywhere, but I don't want harsh lines and soft lines. I want it all even, and ideally I want it all nice and soft. that we've got a first layer of the brown in there, and I'm using the burnt umber from the polychromos, but just go with any brown that you've got. This is the walnut brown that I'm coming in with now, and I'm going to repeat the process again, not pressing on any harder, pressing on just as hard as I pressed on last time. And I'm going to come over the top of this area with the walnut brown. I don't want to cover over the whole of the burnt umber that I put in, particularly on the top up here, particularly on the edges. I want that to feather out so that I can see some of the burnt umber and also some of that cream that we put on the edge. Let that show through and feather that towards the top of the bee's back again, and then so feather it into the top of this yellow stripe, really, really lightly, hardly any pigment going down on the paper. I'm going to leave these little bits up here again where we put that cold grey. That's just going to create a nice little highlight. If I go over, a bit of them, that's fine. I just don't want to completely fill them in. I could always dab them back out with an eraser afterwards, but I'm going to try and leave them as best I can just to preserve them a little bit. But as I say, if you do go over them, there's always ways to put them back in. You can always sort of dab it with an eraser. You can always dab it with an eraser and take the bits back out. It's not the end of the world if you go over the top. I'm going to come round here again. There's not really any direction at all around here that we can see. Not in this bit in the corner. So because I can't see any direction, what I can do is just go to little circular strokes. And by little circular strokes, what I mean is just little strokes like this. Again, I still want a nice even pressure. I say circular strokes, they're probably more like little oval strokes, to be honest. But you just want a nice even pressure, and you can fill an area in like that. So because I can't see any fur direction, I can just use little circular strokes where I need to. But I don't want to press on hard. I want to bring these little circular strokes around. I haven't forgotten about the leg. I'm going to do the leg separately, and the reason I'm going to do the leg separately is because on the computer screen that I'm looking at the picture on, I can see that that leg is a little bit more blue, and this is quite sort of brown around here. So I can deal with the leg separately. And I'm going to put a different colour in. And also it just means that I can keep that division. So I don't need to worry about losing the lines or losing where it is, because I can just deal with that separately. I'm just going to make sure we've got some lovely feathered bits on the bottom. Don't want to feather it too far, but just make sure it feathers out. There is. I'm just plotting that little bit in around there. There's a tiny little bit on the front, and then we've got this bit of the yellow stripe. And then remember, we're just missing everything out under the wing at the minute. The reason that I'm missing it out is, first of all, just as I've explained on the leg, I want to keep that division there. And once I start going to put colours in there, my pencil lines either have to get harder or I have to remember, where the wing is. But secondly, as we look at the reference photograph, everything under there is quite sort of milky. It's got this film on top of it because it's obviously got the wing on top. So I want to put those colours in and desaturate them and deal with them afterwards. And I might as well just deal with that all in one go afterwards, because the colours are going to be slightly different anyway. Not necessarily the colours that we put down, but the way that we put them down and the finished effect. I'm just going to dab out a tiny little spot there, just a tiny little bit, which is actually a bit of a highlight on the side of the bee, and I don't want that to get too dark. Because we're working on watercolour paper, it's not so easy to, we work from light to dark with our pencils, and it's not so easy to go back over and put light on top of darks. It's not impossible, but it's not that easy, and you'll never get a really, really bright white to go over the top of a darker colour on watercolour paper. You'll get some lighter colour go over the top if you use a white, but you won't get it to go bright white. So it's easier to preserve those bits as we go along, and that's what I'm trying to do with that. Preserve those little bits. And then again, bring this bit on the edge. I don't want to feather this pencil too far off the top of that back, or it's just not going to look that real. The fur on the back of the bee, obviously he has got a furry back, but it's not that long, so I don't want to make my pencil lines too long on the back of that up there. And I'm just going to bring this down. Again, there's not much direction that we can see in here, but this time I am going to keep my pencil strokes going in the direction that I want them to go, so i.e. coming down the back of the bee, because I'm going to want them to feather into these lighter stripes in a bit here. There isn't much room for me to go to circles there, so I'm just going to keep that in the direction that I want it to go. Let's blend this together a little bit. Before we start to make this darker, let's blend this brown area together. Because we had the colder, we had the cold grey 1 up here, didn't we? This is the cold grey 2, and I'm just blending this area out with the cold grey 2 up here. Just a little bit. Feathering that all the way to the edge. Don't want to completely take out that yellow that's on the edge, but I am just going to feather this out a little bit on the top with the cold grey 2. And just feathering it in the direction that I can see that the fur's going in. And then around this side, I'm going to use the warm grey 2. I'm just using those little circular strokes on the corner. One thing I will do actually, where we put that little light bit in, this is the cold grey 1, and I'm going to use that just where we put that, those little highlights in there, and then come around with the warm grey 2. And I'm just blending it, so I don't want to press on any harder, just want to blend these colours together a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit on that bit there as well. And also just blend this on the back. Where it goes towards the edge, I definitely want to keep that little wispy bit. And where it comes down the edge here, I want to keep that wispy bit, because this is going to feather into the lovely lighter bit that he's got on his back. I also want to come back in and blend these yellow bits again. So this is the Naples yellow again, and I'm going to blend that bit of the stripe out, and also this bit of the stripe. I'm going to blend this yellow stripe, and again blend that up and off the back up here. Take it up and off the back, just little wispy bits, and just bring these colours together a little bit inside that yellow stripe. I'm also going to go back in with the burnt ochre again and bring a bit of the burnt ochre first of all around here, around the back of this stripe. Top of this stripe as well. And when I'm blending from a darker colour to a lighter colour, so I'm blending from this walnut brown into the yellow, I want to start my pencil in the darker section and drag it into the lighter section. I don't want to go from the lighter section out to the darker section, because if I bring the lighter section towards the darker section, I will just pick up all of that dark brown pencil, bring it back into the lighter area, the yellow area here, every time I put my pencil down again, and I'll just bring that dark brown in and just contaminate it. So going from the darker section to the lighter section all the time with the pencil keeps the lighter section cleaner. Blend this on this side as well. I'm going to blend this brown ochre into this back as well. Bring it around here. So I don't want to go over these areas that we've put in the little highlights, but I do want it to go into the brown area. I want it to go up here as well. Blend into this stripe. So blending it again off the back, off the darker area, and blending it into the lighter area, and just taking that around the back a little bit, keeping those little bits in the middle that are the highlights. Again, you saw here I dabbed a bit out. I can always dab that back out if I feel at the end that I've covered it up too much. The areas are really small, so sometimes you just can't help. Your pencil just goes places that you may not want it to go when you're working on a smaller area, but we can always dab that back out again. And we've obviously got a darker bit on this side, and on this side of the stripe I want to bring that sanguine in again, darken this down. So you can see that I've built this up. I haven't just done this all in one layer of each colour. I've gone back in and I've done it again, and I've built those layers up, and it's allowing me to create a nice softness to the portrait. Because each layer is really light, I'm getting that light soft result and effect of the portrait that I want. But secondly, it's allowing me to really blend these colours on the paper. I can't stress enough how lots of layers, even if it's of the same colour, lots of layers will get you a better result than just one layer of that colour. It'll just give you a much better result. I'm just going to bring a bit of this sanguine around here as well. Bring that into the brown on the back there. And even when I want it a little bit darker, so it's a little bit darker around here, you can see it's a little bit darker there on the reference photograph. I don't press on harder. What I do is I'll just go over it a few more times. I definitely don't want to press on it harder. And then I'm going to take that cream and just bring all of this together on the back with this cream pencil. Same up here. Take that cream again. I'm taking it from the dark colour towards the light colour, and that keeps the lighter colour cleaner. I'm just going to really gently take this cream back around this top to make sure that I don't lose the lovely cream tint that's on the back of that bee. Just want to preserve that. The next colour that I want to come in with is the dark sepia. It's darker again. So I want to come in with the dark sepia. Again, I don't want to take this colour everywhere. So as we build up through the layers, as a very, very general rule, the lower layers have a larger coverage. So you can see here I put the warm grey one and the cold grey one pretty much everywhere. I put the cream everywhere. And as we've gone up through the layers, we went up through the burnt umber to the walnut, now to the sepia. Every layer, the area that's covered just gets slightly less. And that's because, for a start, I don't want to obliterate all the colours that we've put down underneath. I don't want to go over them all. but it's helping build that depth up. By just covering a smaller area on the upper layers, it's letting those colours come through underneath, and it's helping to achieve. For a start, we're obviously mixing these colours. So by putting these colours on the upper layers in a smaller surface area, it's just letting those other colours underneath come through. It's letting them come through. It's showing we're blending those colours. We're letting the other colours come through, and it's just adding to the depth and the texture of the fur. It's just adding to the depth and the texture. And I don't want to put this dark sepia everywhere. I can let a few bits flick off and over into the yellow areas. I can bring a few bits back this way, and again I'm bringing the little flicks from the darker side to the lighter side. And that keeps everything nice and neat. And again on the bottom, from the darker side to the lighter side, and that keeps the lighter side neat all the time. It keeps it clean. Just breaking that up. Again around here, I can't really see much fur direction. I can see that it comes over this way a little bit, but I can't really see much on the corner. So I'm just keeping these pencil strokes really small on the corner. Bring those over. And let those pencils, I've got quite a sharp pencil, and I'm just letting this flick off at the bottom again, just to create this lovely fuzziness that this bee's got on the bottom down here. Let that fall over underneath him. Come off his underside there, and then just follow that up. Keeping these pencil strokes lovely and soft. And just working around this leg, and then I shall put that in afterwards. There's a tiny little bit in the middle there, just a tiny little bit darker. And I'll bring this off down the back. So it gets to about here, and this fur starts to curve around. It sort of gets to the end of this little bit of the line drawing here, and it just starts to curve, come over, and then it's obviously going to come down his back. So we've just got that little curve going on there. I'm going to take the kneadable eraser and just very carefully dab in to the bottom part of this bee. And then I want to take the warm grey one. Let me just dab that out. So I'm just dabbing this edge out a little bit more. Dab that out. And with the warm grey one, and coming around, so we're bringing the pencil round as if it was coming down off the body of the bee. I'm going to just bring this warm grey one around the back of this bee. Bring this all the way down here. This lovely fuzziness that's coming over the back of this bee. I'm also just going to dab this little bit off. I'm just dabbing the underside of the body of the bee. I'm leaving the legs for the minute, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, so we've got this lovely brown here that we've put in. I'm coming over the top of this brown with this warm grey one to blend that a little bit. Blend that down and also bring it around and down here. And again, just letting that pencil flick out at the bottom. So that we create this lovely fuzziness on the bottom. Got these wispy bits coming off, and this is the warm grey one. But any light warm grey that you've got, if you're not using the polychromos, any light warm grey that you've got will work. On this side, on top of that, I'm just going to bring a little bit of the coal grey in. Bit of the cold grey over the top just on that side. I'm going to take a cold grey 5 and I'm going to plot in these stripes that are on the back and plot in the darker stripes. So what I'm going to do is there is a stripe. So there is a bit of a stripe right down on the bottom down here. And I'm plotting that in. This is the cold grey 5, but any dark coldish grey that you've got will work. I've got a little bit down on the bottom there. I've also got a little bit around here to plot in. I've got a bit there coming around there, just a little bit, and I'm plotting it in lightly because if I plot it in lightly and I need to change something, it means that I can change it. It's much easier to change something if you've pressed on quite lightly. If you've pressed on hard, if I'd have pressed on really hard with all these lines and I needed to change it, it would be a lot harder. There's just a little bit up there, so I'm plotting that in up there. And then there's this little bit that comes around here. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just looking at the reference photograph as a guide, but it certainly doesn't have to be exact. I'm just popping that in there. Backwards and forward strokes. So if I go back to my little piece of paper, this time I'm using almost like little V's. So I'm going one way and then the other, one way and then the other, but I'm keeping them all so I don't think about them too much, and that keeps them quite random. So I want to just plot these in with these backwards and forward strokes. I want to be mindful of the direction that they're coming around the bee's body. So I don't just want to come straight down with the lines. I want to follow the direction of this bee's body. Bring that around there. And as I say, I've already put these bits in, but I'll just go over them again. Bring that down. And then I'm going to come into the rest of this area with, this is the warm grey one. So I'm going to come into this area. We've got a little bit of, there's a little lighter bit around there. So I'm going to leave that for the minute. Again, I could always, if I go over it and I make a mistake, I can always dab it out. But I'm just going to leave it for the minute. And bring this down. Bring that around here again. Just blend this out. Just leave a little space around there. I've started to get some nice light grey colour into that area. These stripes on the back, you might be able to see, certainly the picture that I'm looking at, they have got that lovely purple blue tint to them. And I'm going to use the Delft blue. This is the Delft blue from the Polychromos. And I'm going to come over, so we plotted them with the grey, which was a slightly more neutral colour. If I'd have made a mistake, it would have been easier to correct it with that grey because it's not quite so strong. But now that I know that I've got them in the position that I sort of want them in, I'm going to come in and tint them with this Delft blue. And the coal grey was a good colour for me to plot those in with, because obviously this is blue, that had a blue tint to it. So it's not going to detract too much from what I'm going to put over on the top of it now. It's not going to really alter it. And this Delft Blue is quite a strong colour anyway. So it's definitely going to tint what I want to tint on the back. So I just want to come over, follow these lines round. And just add a little bit of, don't want to press on hard because I want to be able to blend this. I want to be able to blend it in a minute with everything that goes on top of it, all the other colours. So what I want to do is I want to press on so lightly that this colour just sits on the surface. And by it sitting on the surface of the paper, in a minute I'm going to put other colours over the top of it, and I want to be able to blend it and move it around a little bit. If I'd have pressed on really hard with this pigment would just sort of sit here and it wouldn't blend so easily and it wouldn't move. But this way now, it means that I can blend it and move it. Just by pressing on really lightly with the layer, with the pencil as I put this layer down, and it just keeps it sat on the surface. This is a cold grey one, and what I want to do is come over the top of where I've just put that Delft Blue, smooth it a little bit with this cold grey one, and also it's just going to blend it a little bit. So I've used the cold grey one because obviously the Delft Blue is a bluey purple colour. I've obviously put the cold grey down underneath this, and I want to smooth it out, but I want to still keep this blue. So the cold grey one is quite light, and it's just smoothing and blending this colour a little bit. And I'm blending it in the direction that I put it down so that it keeps the curve coming around the body. It's quite blurred down here. I don't necessarily want lots of strong focus down here. I just want it to be nice and blended. So this is the warm grey 2. I'm bringing this warm grey 2 over the back of this little bumblebee now. This is the reason that I wanted to smooth out the pencil, the Delft Blue that we put down. I wanted to smooth it out with the cold grey one first, so that it was smooth and blended a little bit before I came in with this warm grey 2. And I'm just going to bring this warm grey 2 into these lighter areas, not into the blue areas, into these lighter areas. And bring a little bit of this around here. Bring it over again in the direction that this fur's coming over the back. All these lovely hairs are coming over the back of this bee's body. I want to come round in that direction. Bring it around here. Just on the base round here, there's a little bit of this yellow again, and this is the Naples yellow again that I'm just putting around that area. It's a tiny little bit, just a little bit around the bottom, around there. And then in with the burnt ochre again. Just a tiny dusting around this base, over this Naples yellow. The Naples yellow is just a little bit bright, but this is just going to tone it down, this burnt ochre. And bring it out around here. Feather that out around the edge, around there. I'm going to blend this on the back again, so I'm going to come in with the warm grey one. Use this warm grey one to smooth some of this down. Still don't want to press on hard, I just want to bring some of this area together a bit, and also just help to get rid of a little bit of the grain. I can see a bit of the grain of the paper on the back. This is the Fabriano Artistico 300 GSM paper, and it can be a little bit grainy until you get through that grain, until you work through that graininess. But you can get through that graininess with the layers, with light layers. So you don't want to try and get rid of the grain with really heavy pressure on the layers, or you're just going to crush the tooth of the paper down. You'll get rid of the grain, but you'll crush the tooth of the paper down. And once you've crushed the tooth of that paper, the paper is unlikely to want to take any more pencil then. So you're pretty much, you'll have reached the maximum amount of layers and the maximum pencil that you could get on the page. But as long as you keep going in with light layers, the Fabriano Artistico will take an awful lot of layers for you. So you can just keep building and building the colour, if that's what you need to do, and the texture, if that's what you need to do. This is the coal grey 4, and I'm going to bring this coal grey into the back of this bumblebee. I'm just going to feather it off the areas that we put in with the Delft blue. So I want to just feather the Delft blue, but take it a little bit further so it breaks up some of the lighter area on this bumblebee's back. But just by breaking up this Delft blue just a little bit, bringing this colour around. And just shaping. Shaping the back of this bee, bringing the fur around in the direction that I can see it's coming down on the body. And just using those backwards and forward strokes that I spoke about. I have covered up a couple of these little highlights here. I will put those back in. So as I said, it's not the end of the world. I can put those back in. Just want to break the back end of this bee up a little bit, break the lighter areas up and just make it look quite soft. Quite softly focused. And then I'm going to come into the lighter areas a little bit. This is a warm grey 4. And I'm going to bring this into the lighter areas to break up some of these lighter areas just a little bit more. I don't want to take it everywhere, but there's not a big sort of stripe differential between the lights and the darks, or between the grey and the blue bit that we've put in, the purple bit. So I want to break that up and soften that out a little bit. This comes around there a bit. Break that up on the side. Just want to join these lighter and darker bits together a bit more, because there's not a really defined stripe as you would imagine on a bee. Like up here there is, but down here those stripes are not quite so defined. So I'm just bringing this pencil round and just joining these areas together just a little bit. Again, just using little directional strokes coming down, bringing these areas together. A bit darker down here. Keeping it all really, really soft. This dark sepia up here, I'm going to bring this dark sepia down, and it comes down further, and I can bring it down a little bit further now, because now I've put this purple, this Delft blue in underneath, I can blend the brown over the top. I just wanted to get that purple in, the Delft blue, before I brought this brown down too far, but I can bring that down now. So just very, very light strokes, bringing the pencil over the top of this lovely purple colour, this Delft blue, bringing that down. Before I go any further with the back of the bee, and I'm not finished with the back of the bee yet, but before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these legs in. I'm going to put these legs in. So I said that I was going to leave this bit here because I could see that it was slightly more blue. So I'm going to go in with the coal grey one. And I'm just going to get a little bit of colour onto this leg. So I'm putting a little bit of the coal grey one there and also a little bit down here. A bit of that coal grey one down there. The rest of the leg I'm going to use a warm grey one. This little bit here is actually the leg behind, so I'm going to leave that. I'm just going to come down here with the warm grey one. Join that up. This is the cinnamon from the Polychromos range, and I'm going to use a little bit of cinnamon. I can see that where the join of the bee's leg, there's a little bit of cinnamon there, and I can also see that there's a little bit of cinnamon coming down on the bottom part of this leg. So I'm just going to put a little bit of cinnamon coming down there. I can't really get much more in than just a little pencil stroke. It's quite a small area. I can also see, and I'm going to put this in with the cinnamon, I can see that this leg at the back has got cinnamon there. So I'm just going to pop that little bit in. I'm going to do these other legs as well at the same time. So this is the warm grey one going into this leg. I'm going to bring it just down here, but again we've got cinnamon going down there. But before I do that, I'm going to put this one in at the back. So again, so this has got to flick up under the fur. This leg has got to go up under the fur. So I'm going to put some colour in there, flick that up under that fur, and then again bring this bit around. And there's not really much that we can actually get into these legs. So I'm just putting a suggestion of the leg in. There's a little bit of this cinnamon. I'm bringing this cinnamon back in again. Bring the cinnamon into here. So I've got a nice sharp pencil because obviously I want to keep a nice crisp pencil in areas. And also in here. Bring that. And it's just one little pencil line. That's all I can get in there. But that's all we need to just suggest that there is a leg in there. I can see a little bit of pink down this side. So I'm just using that backwards and forwards little V stroke again that I spoke of. I'm just going to let that go up and under the fur. Down this bit of the leg down here. Certainly on the screen that I'm looking at the bee on, you may not see that on your screen, but on the screen that I'm looking at, I can see a little bit more of this purple that we've put into the back here. So I'm using the Delft blue again, and I'm just dotting it down the leg. I don't want to take over from that cinnamon completely. I'm just dotting that in and just adding a little bit down the leg down there. You can also just see a tiny bit. So again, I'm just dotting that in. It's just a tiny, tiny little bit on that leg. This leg's going to go quite dark up here. But before I do go in with a dark colour, and ultimately we're going to go towards the black with it, I want to go into this leg with the dark indigo. This is the dark indigo from the Polychromos. And as I said, this area is quite dark, but it's also quite blue. So I'm going to come in with the dark indigo into this area, come down the side of this leg, bring this dark indigo into here. Follow this leg down. I'm also going to follow this bit down on this side. follow that bit down. Again, I've got a sharp pencil because it's a tiny little leg and I don't want big clumpy lines in here. I want it to be quite neat in this area. So I've got that blue into that space. This is a Payne's grey and I'm going to come over the top with the Payne's grey and take the top of this leg up towards this yellow stripe. It's going to bring this Payne's grey down over here and again just shape around the edge of this leg. I'm going to come, so we've got like a little join in the leg there, and then I'm just going to, and again it's just a tiny little stroke because the leg really isn't that big. I can't really get much more than just one little pencil stroke, and down here I'm just using little dots actually, not even using full pencil strokes. I'm not even really using dashes. I'm just using little dots. I'm going to feather this up this way so that leg will feather up and under that fur, and then bring that down as well. Just nice little directional pencil strokes. Just looking, so every second or so I'm looking at this reference photograph to just follow the suggestion of this leg round. And again I'm just going to little dots again now because I'm just not going to get much else in there, and it just won't look, it's got to be quite soft. It's got to be an area that doesn't have much detail, or it's not going to look that realistic. Just want to get the suggestion of some legs in there. But we don't want to take away from the focus of the body. We don't want to take away from what's actually going up on that body. We just want to put something in so it looks like it's got legs. So I'm going to come around, still the Payne's grey around here. Come down in directional strokes. And then again, I'm going to come down. And just dot it in on the bottom. I'm going to come in with the dark sepia over the top of that. And blend this into the rest of the body up here now. So it's just going a little bit bluer. Bring that down there. Bring the suggestion of this leg off down the bottom. And less is definitely going to be more, I think, in these legs. For a start, it's always better to just do a bit and then to take a step back, have a look at it. You might need to go in and add a bit more or make bits a bit darker. But I think when you've got something that's quite delicate like these legs, I think it's better to start with less and add more if you need to, rather than going in really heavy and then trying to take it back out if you think you've made something too dark or put too much focus in an area that you didn't want that focus in. So I'm just bringing off a few hairs on the side of this leg. So because I don't want these legs to really take away from what's going on the body and the wing and the head, I want to desaturate them a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with the warm grey one, and I'm going to come over the top of them now and just desaturate them with this warm grey one to just take out some of the colour and just blend them out. So this bit down here, blend it out. And this bit as well. Make it so that it's just a bit more desaturated. What I do want to do actually, that is just a slightly thicker bit of leg down there. So let's just correct that. Let's put a tiny bit of the dark sepia in, and then I'm just going to go over it and tone it down. Desaturate that. I'm going to use this warm grey one and all these little bits of hairs that we've been putting in underneath as well. I'm just blending those out now. Blending them, making them look quite fuzzy underneath that bee. So what I want to do now, I've put the legs in and I want to start to darken down this body a little bit before we go on to the head and the wing over here. This is the black from the polychromos. I've got it in a pencil extender just because it's getting a little bit small. So I've put it into a pencil extender, but it's the black from the polychromos. And I want to come in to this area. Again, I don't want to put this black everywhere. I want to do exactly what I've done with all the other colours. And as we've gone up through the layers, every layer gets less surface area covered. But I want to bring a little bit of this black through this back. Feather it into the top of this. Top of this stripe. Bring that around. I still don't want to press on hard. Just want to take this black into places. I don't want to take this black everywhere. I still want to use these little backwards and forward strokes. I want to create these lovely wispy bits. Make it look like there's all this lovely fur on the back of this bee's body. But I don't want to cover everywhere. I'm going to come around this wing still, just for the minute. And add this darker pencil where it really is quite dark. Really quite dark. It's quite dark up there, isn't it? But not covering the whole of the area. So that allows some texture to come through. And then I'm going to do the same. So again, on this side, it starts to come round a little bit, although we've got this lovely highlight around here. The thing is, I don't want to press on hard. Even though we're putting black on now, I still want to press on lightly. I can bring a little bit of the black around here, over this leg. Just let that body feather down into that leg a little bit. I'll come around the back of this wing. I'm going to go into that wing in a minute. Put a little bit of pencil in. I'm going to bring the feathered bits down under the tummy of the bee, underneath. I don't want to go over all of this lovely wispy bits that we've put in. I just want to darken bits down. So just let that feather over a little bit. Come over into this leg, the leg that we've already made a little bit more blue. So I can bring And I'm just bringing a dusting of the black over in places. I'm just letting it look as if, I'm just sort of putting a glaze on. What I have done is I've just gone and filled that bit in the middle where I didn't mean to. So I'm just going to take that bit back out. I'm just dabbing that bit back out because I just filled in between those, that front leg and that back leg, and I didn't want to do that. So, but you see, I could just dab it back out because the pencil's gone down really lightly. I could just dab that back out and correct that. Keep it really, really light. And then bring that black around this back as well. So again, we were starting to shape the fur over, weren't we, from about here. It starts to come over this way just a little bit. I'm going to take an odd 1 or 2 tiny little pencil strokes into that yellow. I don't want too much to go into that yellow because we've already built up those browns. But 1 or 2 is fine. And then I'm going to bring this over. Don't want to take these little wispy bits too far away from this body. Bring this over. Starts to come over this way. And start to shape this bit around here. Shape this bit around here. Darken this down on the back as well. Just using these backwards and forwards stroke, we've got a darker bit here, haven't we? Bit that comes round around here. Going to add a touch into this leg, darken that down. And now we're starting to think about the direction coming over the back again. So I'm just bringing that direction around the back of this bee. Bring that around there. And just put a little bit of texture in. Take a tiny bit of this burnt ochre into the back of this stripe again. Just make sure that's nice and blended. I'm just using the kneadable eraser just to tidy the edge of that stripe up a little bit. I've just lost the edge of that stripe there, just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, because I've dabbed that out and take that almost back to the raw paper, I'm going to go back in with the cream and then I'm going to work back up through those layers. This is the Naples yellow again. Back in with that Naples yellow. Back in with this burnt ochre. Just using little circular strokes. I just wanted to tidy that up on that edge just a little bit. And back in with a tiny little bit of this sanguine. Just on that side. Break that up just a little bit. Take that burnt ochre just up there a little bit as well. I'm going to make this little bit here a bit stronger with the Delft blue. I'm going to come back in with the Delft blue in this area. I don't want to press on hard. You can see the pencils, or hopefully you'll be able to see with your pencils that the pencils are going down really quite quite nicely now. The paper gets where it's more like an ice rink. It's a smoother sort of texture as we've been working the surface, as we've been putting all the layers down. Pencils go down, they go down quite nice, and they're quite intense as they go down. Whereas when we first started, you felt, because I'm still using the same amount of pressure, I'm still using light pressure, but you felt that perhaps the paper wasn't always sort of catching the pigment quite as much. But now as we get to this sort of stage now, even with that same sort of pressure, the paper just picks up that pigment off the pencil, and it really goes down quite nicely by the time you get to this stage. Bring a little bit of this Delft blue into this bit on the side around here. And then what I'm going to do, first of all, I said I was just going to dab this highlight back in because I covered it up when I shouldn't have done. I needed to preserve it a little bit more. So I'm just dabbing bits of highlights back into that area on the back there. Just dabbing that in a little bit. I'm going to go, I dab that, and I needed to dab it further up. So I'm just putting the warm grey one back into that. And then what I want to do is to take, this is the white from the Polychromos, and I'm just going to bring this together now. I'm using strokes that are in the direction of the fur. But what I'm doing is I'm sort of using the pencil, not to necessarily put white down. What I want to do is I want to pick up what's underneath it and just blend it, and perhaps desaturate it in areas, just a little bit in areas. So what I'm going to do is in this back area, so this was a lovely bit of highlight here, I'm going to go into that bit. And I'm using the pencil coming around this back in the direction that this fur is coming around in. And just blending this pencil out, letting it feather out on the end, letting it feather off on the end. And just blending with it, blending the areas. Every now and again, especially when you're working in the dark area, I don't know if you can see that, but the end of that pencil, can you see right on the end of that pencil, it's picking up the dirty pigment. Well, it's not the dirty pigment, it's picking up the dark pigment, and I don't want that. I want to keep it nice and clean. So every now and again, I will clean it. I'm going to use a little bit of the walnut brown in this area to just bring this colour around here. I really want this nice and soft and diffused on the side here. So I'm just bringing that around the base. And just using it to shape and just add a touch of colour to some of these stripes on the back. They're already quite nicely blended actually. This is just blending it a little bit more, but to be honest, it's quite nicely blended on the back. Just wanted to put a bit of that brown into that area. This is the walnut brown. And just make sure that that all looks nice and fuzzy. I'm hardly putting any pressure on the side of this bee here, hardly any pressure. I'm going to bring this, so this is the lovely feathered bit on the side, I'm going to bring this round a little bit more with a coal grey too, just in areas so that we can really see this fuzzy bit all around the bottom. Just break that up a little bit. Just bring this coal grey too down into this area that we've put around here, just every now and again, so it does look like it's got a nice fuzzy bit of fur on the bottom. Just break into that, and then I'm just going to come in with the dark sepia. Make sure that's nice and dark. This is the nugget from the polychromos, and I'm going to come into this area, just use little circular strokes to just blend that. I don't want to see, or I want to see very little grain in the portrait at the end. I don't want to see much grain. So I want to use little circular strokes, use the nugget and just use that to blend that together a little bit. Also just drag a bit of nugget into this back area again. They're not really, well, they're not white stripes, are they? They're light stripes, but there's quite a few colours in there. So I'm just dragging a bit of this nugget into the back and just blending this together. Going to blend this bit on top as well with the nugget, and it just doesn't take away, because I'm not pressing on hard, it doesn't take away from the direction of fur and texture that we've put underneath. It just helps to push the pencil, the little circular strokes just pushes the pencil around from different directions and just pushes it into that grain. I'm going to take the cold grey one and just put a little bit of the highlight in there. There are other colours in there. If you wanted to, you could go in with a turquoise colour and you could add a spot of the highlight colour in there. But to be honest, you could just go in with your cold grey and just put that in there. And that would be fine. I'm just going to go over it with the cream, and that's fine. I'm going to come into this bit on the top here as well, actually, with the bit of the cream. Bring that together a little bit. I'm just going to dot and make sure I've got a little bit of a highlight in there. Just dab a bit out with the Tombow eraser or the kneadable eraser. I've just done it with the kneadable. I'm going to go back in with the Tombow there just to enhance that a little bit more. Bit there as well, actually. Just take a little bit of that out. Just some little highlights, and then I'm just going to blend it. So I'm just going to blend it with the white. Not because I want to make it white, just because there's other colours under there already, and I'm just going to pick those colours up and just blend them a little bit. So I said I was going to come onto this wing at the top, and I'm going to come onto the head and the wing and the antennae now. The first thing there is, though, there's a tiny little bit of the wing around here. This is I've just taken out the edge with the kneadable eraser, and this is the warm grey one. And what I'm going to do is just follow around that and put a little bit of this warm grey one into that area. Tiny little area there. There's not much that's going to go into this. This is the burnt ochre, and I'm going to follow a little bit of the burnt ochre. Tiny little bit in there. There's hardly anything in the back of that wing. So tiny little bit in there. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the warm grey one. There's just a slightly darker bit on this side. Tiny little bit. And that is pretty much, I'm just going to pick up those crumbs, and then I'm going to go back with the warm grey one, and I'm going to put the warm grey one over the top, and that's just going to desaturate it and push it back behind the rest of the bee. So I'm just pushing that, putting that warm grey one into that. And also, whilst I'm here with this warm grey one, I'm just going to add an extra few hairs on the top of the head up here. Just add an extra little bit. Just dab that out. Around here, this bit here, this is the head of the bee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just dab out the edge, pencil line right on the edge. I'm going to take, this is the warm grey one, and I'm going to take the warm grey one out, working out from the bottom of the area again, just like we've done before. So working from the base of this little stripe here that's his head out towards the outer edge so that we can get this nice wispy bit on the edge again. And that obviously comes round and it joins up with this bit that's the other side. And I'm going to pop a bit of the warm grey into that bit as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in, this is the burnt ochre, put a bit of the burnt ochre, this is the yellow stripe and this is the bit that's coming out the other side of the wing. So I'm going to put a bit of the burnt ochre in there. I'm going to go in with a bit of the burnt umber. There's quite a line, so I've got a nice little line down the edge of this wing, and then I'm going to let this feather into each other a little bit. It's still very much a dark area, but it has got just the bottom of that stripe on. So I'm just going to leave that like that for the minute. I'm going to come into the top of this. So we've got the little bit of the head. So if I just put a tiny little dash there, that's the wing. And what's above that is the head of the bee. So I'm going to feather that. It's a tiny, tiny little bit. There's not a lot we can get into there. But I am going to just dot it, feather it out, tiny little bit. This is the Naples yellow again, and I'm going to bring the Naples yellow up to the edge of that. Feather that out on the edge. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just feathering it out towards the edge of the head of the bee. Feather that there. This is everything that's on top of above the wing at the minute. Feather that out. That sort of comes around there. And then back with this burnt ochre and bring that towards the top of the bee, towards the head. And also I'm just going to feather this little brown bit. It's probably quite a small area and you can't really see. I'm just working in that tiny little brown bit and I'm just feathering it towards the edge, so towards the front of the head of the bee with a bit of the brown ochre. Burnt ochre, sorry, not brown ochre. The bit of the burnt ochre. Underneath here, we've got this little bit of yellow around here. I've already put a bit of cream in. This is the Naples yellow again. I'm going to put a bit of the Naples yellow in. And I'm going to bring the burnt umber. This is the burnt umber. And the burnt umber, so everything that we're doing now is under the wing. So everything under this wing has got to look really quite desaturated compared to what was on the top of the wing. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in with the burnt umber. I'm bringing the colour into this wing area. This is the burnt umber. This is a bit of the cream. There's a bit of the cream around here. And I'm just going to bring that cream in. I just want to get the suggestion of the wing coming over the body of the bee. So obviously blending that bit of burnt umber with the cream that has already given it that sort of translucent look. That's what we're trying to create here, the translucent look. I've got a bit there that I've put in with the burnt umber, and now I'm coming over this with the burnt ochre. And just so that you know roughly where I'm coming, you can see this is carrying on down here. If I just dot that in, I'm just literally dotting this in so you can see where we are, but that's roughly where I'm coming over from. The line is there on the line drawing, so you have got a line to follow if you've got the line drawing. Bring that little bit over. I'm going to come around here as well into this yellow stripe that's under the wing, and I'm coming into it with the burnt ochre. Just putting a little bit of the burnt ochre into that yellow stripe round there. It's not much, tiny little bit. And then I'm going to start to bring the cold grey in, and it's the cold grey in this area that's going to shape this wing a little bit. So I'm also bringing the cold grey, so this brown stripe that I was talking about, this dark stripe, I'm going to feather this out again from the edge of this stripe towards the front of the head. So going towards the front of the bee's head again. Just following this stripe round. I mean, it's such a small little space, but all I'm doing is just following this stripe round. Following that around here. And it's just little dots really because the area is so small. And just feathering that into that lighter striped area. I'm going to use the dark sepia and I'm going to break this up a little bit. I'm going to break this stripe up as it joins the head. The yellow stripe joins the head. Just needs to feather it and break it up just a little bit more. I'm just using a bit of the dark sepia in here as well. Tiny, tiny little bit. Break that up. And then I'm just bringing this stripe around and letting it just feather into this wing a little bit. I'm not looking to get this exactly as it is in the reference photograph. I just want it to look like a wing that's coming over. I'm not looking to get it all exactly correct. It's quite a small space to start with. It's quite a small area. So we can't get a lot in there anyway. And secondly, I want to try and keep it quite simple. I don't want it to get too complicated. I just want it to look like a wing that's coming over the top. One thing I will do whilst I'm here actually is, before I forget, because I am known to forget about putting in antennae and whiskers and things. So I'll put this in now. So this is the coal grey one. And I'm just going over and literally just colouring that in, just colouring in that section. I'm not worried about the pencil lines in this area because this is going to go really quite dark. So what I'm going to do is just bring little dots down, little dashes down. So that it looks like those little, so that it looks like the pattern on those little antennae. And again, I'm going to do this on this side. It's quite a longer bit there. And then I'm just going to go and just use little dashes to just create the little bits of pattern along the edge. And then it gets to the top and just changes a little bit. I'm just going to round that bit off on that side actually. And that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to do. The only thing I do want to do is just to take a coal grey one. This is a coal grey one, and just come over all of the antennae. Come down the length of that antennae just to desaturate it just a little bit, just to create a bit more, just to create a softer antenna there. And that's pretty much it for that. That's pretty much all I want to do. So back to this wing. We're nearly there, aren't we? We're just going to come back to this wing now. What I want to do is I'm just going to dab off this wing there. I'm going to use a warm grey one, and I'm going to follow this wing around. So I'm going to come around the edge of these pencil lines. I do want to make sure the pencil lines, I want to make sure those pencil lines are pretty much gone. But what I want to do is just follow around those pencil lines, follow on this side as well. Again, I'm just keeping it really simple. I'm just going to come around the edge of this wing and I'm going to follow these veins. I've plotted in some of the veins. I'm using my pencil on, it's not on its side, but you can see it's tilted. So if I was handwriting, it would be like this, and it's like this. It's tilted quite far back. And that means I'm using the side of my pencil just a little bit more. And that means I'm getting a softer pencil line that's going down. I don't want a really harsh pencil line. I just want more of a little sketchy pencil line in here. And I'm just creating a suggestion of these veins. I know they're not the right colour, and we're going to go on and we're going to add a bit of colour. But once again, if I can plot it with a light colour pencil that I know that I can change if I need to, it's just going to make it easier for me. It's going to make it easier to plot bits in. I'm not looking for necessarily getting everything in the right place. Just want it to look like veins, a suggestion of the veins. So I've got enough in there. I'm quite happy with what I've put in there. This is the Caput Mortuum pencil, and over these lines that I've just put in, I'm going to really gently drag, just using little dashes, drag this pencil over these lines that I've just sketched in. Really, really lightly. I've got a darker bit there that I'm just putting in, and a little bit around here. All of these pencil lines, but really, really lightly. Hardly any colour. I don't want this to get really heavy. I just want there to be a suggestion of the veins in the wing. That's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to put in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the warm grey one, now that I've got those little veins in, and I'm going to take a bit of colour out over, coming out from the body and coming down towards the end of this wing. Just a light little bit of pencil into that space. Just on the end up here, I'm going to take the burnt ochre that we've used before, and I just want to put a couple of sweeping strokes just to add a tiny bit of colour. The amount of pigment that is going down on the paper here at this point is almost non-existent. It is tiny. You can hardly see it's coming out on the paper. If I go back to my piece of paper, that is the amount of pigment that's coming. I'm really not, just the weight of the pencil is just taking the pigment off. I'm not putting any pressure down. That's all the colour that I want. It is just a little dusting that I want on this area. I want to keep this as simple as possible. I want to try and make this as simple as possible. Just putting a bit of a dusting around these areas that we've just put in with the Caput Mortuum. Tiny little dusting. And less is definitely more. Less will definitely be more for this, because we want this to look translucent. This is the coal grey too, and on the bottom down here. So I'm coming from the top of the wing here, that's back in the body of the bee. And again, I'm putting the same amount of pressure, i.e. I'm not putting any pressure on. I'm just letting the weight of the pencil bring a bit of this coal grey too off the pencil. And that's all I want to do. I just want to put a little bit. So I'm putting a bit around here at the top, and I've just put a bit over here. And that's it. I'm going to keep this really, really simple today. So I'm just coming over the top of this with a white polychromos. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use little circular strokes I'm not pressing on really hard, but I'm pressing on a little bit harder than I was when I was putting this suggestion of colour down. And what I'm going to do is I'm just coming over it in circular strokes or oval strokes. I'm coming out from the edge of this bee, coming over the body and into the wing. Again, once you go over the darker bits, you're just going to need to clean that off. And I'm just going to come around with circular strokes. And as I go over these colours with these circular strokes, it's going to blend these colours into the paper and just tint that paper. And this was the reason that we had to put these colours down really, really lightly, because if I'd have put these down quite strongly and quite heavily, they wouldn't move now. I wouldn't be able to blend them. But as it is, I can just push them around a little bit and blend them. And I can just blend that together using that white. I'm just going to take a little bit of this edge back. Now that we know where we are and we know where we've been, I'm just going to take a little bit of that edge back. I'm happy for a little bit of that edge to stay, but I just wanted to take it back a little bit. I'm just going to dab off the crumbs. I'm going to use a coal grey 2 over here just to darken that down a little bit. This dark little bit in the middle here, this bit of his head here, I'm just going to go over that with a bit of the Payne's grey to just reinforce that a little bit and make that darker underneath that wing. I'm going to use a bit of the Payne's grey around here as well to just darken down this back bit of the wing. Just a little bit. And then I'm going to bring the coal grey one over there and just blend that out. Blend that where I can see that at the top. And then just use the warm grey one as well to blend over these areas where I can see that the areas are not quite so blue. And just blend that back in. And we've just kept it really simple. We haven't made this wing too complicated. Just put a tiny little bit of suggestion in there. That bit's a bit darker there. I'm just going to redefine that bit. That's quite a strong bit of vein that's coming out there. And just redefine that bit. And I'm just going to bring a tiny little bit of coal grey 3 just off the side of this face. And just blend that again with the coal grey one. And just make sure that I've just got that. This is the dark sepia. Just going over the top of that coal grey just to make sure that I have got that face, that definition of that face, that head there. And then just taking a little bit of the dark sepia either side of that wing and just taking it into there, just making that bend round a little bit. So I'm just going to bring this down here just a little bit, just bring that to shape that. Let's make that a little bit darker down there. Feather that out there a little bit. If you wanted to add an extra little bit of highlight, this is the manual pen cutter that I'm using, and all I'm doing is putting an extra couple of little highlights around here with that manual pen cutter from the slice tool, or you could just use a little craft knife to just add a couple of those bits in. But if you didn't want to use that, that's absolutely fine. I'm just going to put a couple of little bits over here now I've got it in my hand. But it, like I say, it isn't essential. We've still got a really nice little drawing at the end of it. These are just extra little highlights that have have just gone in with the slice tool, but really, really not essential. Just gonna put a little bit of grey in there and a little bit, this is the coal grey 2, just a little bit of the coal grey 2 in there. Okay, so a couple of final little finishes that I'm going to do. I'm just going to take I'm taking a bit of kneadable eraser and I'm just dabbing out underneath this tummy just to take the tummy back a little bit, the tummy of the bee. I brought the feathered bits down just a little bit much and he got a little bit wide there. So I'm just literally dabbing that off. I'm happy that we've still got some of the grain left on the paper. That just adds to the wispy effect. The other thing that I am going to do is I'm going to take a really, really heavyweight pencil. This is the Caran Aquarelle White. You could take any heavyweight opaque pencil, just a really nice opaque pencil, and I'm just going to come over this wing come over the top of this wing with this pencil. And just create more of a milky film. The polychromos white had gone so far, but I just wanted to add a little bit more, particularly where it comes over the body here. And I'm also just going to bring this down on this side. And I'm also just going to add a tiny little bit of pencil. This is the warm grey 4 on this side, on this wing, and just drag that down as well, just to make it look like we've got a little bit more wing there. Just hadn't made quite enough wing, so I'm just making a little bit more wing in that space. And then that's pretty much it. This is the black again, just making sure that everywhere's nice and dark, but it is. I'm just going over with the last couple of pencils and just touching up little areas that need to be a little bit darker. But that's pretty much it. I think that I will leave that there. Really hope that you have enjoyed drawing in with me. So if you have to, give it a thumbs up. That really helps the channel, lets YouTube know that other people might want to look at this video too. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to leave them in the comments. So if you'd like to see more of these little videos and more tutorials, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications before you leave. I do put videos out here on YouTube regularly. So that's pretty much it. Really hope that you have enjoyed drawing this little bee with me. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.